Good morning, everybody. My name is Patrick Butler, and welcome to episode one, our very first episode of the Asset Resolution Advisors video podcast, where real estate problems meet real solutions. Today, we're going to dive into an issue that most real estate agents and investors walk away from, and we're going to show you how to turn these things into closings. In fact, each week, we're going to share with you real world case studies that we deal with every day at Asset Resolution Advisors and how we solve those. Episode one, the heir, the renovation loan, and the missing escrow. So, very briefly, our goal here is to walk our listeners and our members of our community through how a complicated real estate, and loan situation, one that most investors or agents would just throw in the garbage can actually become a profitable, resolvable transaction if you understand how to navigate probate, servicer communications, and loan level issues. I am joined today by my esteemed business partner, Mr. Steve Schiller. Steve, I refer to him as a reformed loan servicer, but he's a loan servicer extraordinaire, loss mitigation specialist, and all around good guy. Steve, please say hello to our listening audience.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be here, and I'm glad to talk about this topic. It turned out to be a really interesting topic, so I think everybody will enjoy listening to how we resolve this.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's just frame this. What happens when an heir to a property wants to sell the property that isn't even through probate yet? Are they stuck in the mud? And the loan, by the way, on it is a renovation mortgage that, guess what? No renovations were ever completed. So probate through not probate, an heir who doesn't have the property and title, and a reno loan where the renos weren't completed. Most people would say this is a dead deal, but not us. Here's how we turn that mess into a market ready listing. So before I turn the reins over to Mr. Schiller, just one little commercial message. Asset Resolution Advisors is a real estate brokerage company, is a loss mitigation company, is your partner in anything real estate that is not a simple transaction. So Steve, set the scene for us and tell us how we handle such an animal.
Yeah, so we had a real estate investor who found this opportunity working with the heir, and wanted to purchase the house, but had to figure out a way to get through it. One of the issues that they brought up to our attention was the fact that the property was supposed to be renovated. They knew about the renovation loan, but nothing was done. So their concern was, how do we transact, look like a short sale, and how do we transact on it, and could we even get it done? Air did not live in the same city, so they're in a different city. So it got a little complicated as far as trying to get first access to the property
Mhm.
from the mortgage servicer, and then second, figuring out what the loan servicer knew. So that was really the big thing was, hey, can this even be done? If it can be done, what does it look like? Can we clear the title with the probate and the heir? And how do we get the heir on top of everything? So that was really the initial challenge that we took on.
Wow. So there's a lot of moving parts to this thing. And, I'm thinking back before I got into the loss mid space decades ago, just the thought of contacting the mortgage company and trying to navigate through the automated attendant, let alone resolving the issue, was probably one of the biggest challenges. So knowing all these things that we have and why a lot of these deals end up falling apart and unfortunately sometimes end up in foreclosure, how do we approach a deal like this at Asset Resolution Advisors?
Yeah, so the first thing we were able to do is we were able to walk the heir through a process that allowed them to become a essentially authorized on the account, right? So they became authorized through certain documentation that we were able to walk them through. So that was the first step. Once that they got authorization, they were then able to give us authorization, and we were able to start talking to the servicer about the loan and start getting some information, just about what was going on, what the servicer knew, how we can make sure that their records reflected what our records did. And that was really the first challenge we had. And on top of it, what ended up happening was not only did the servicer get all the information, but midway through this process, the servicer changed and the loan was transferred. And so we ended up having to do this twice. So we were able to walk the heir through both situations so that she was able to get access to the information. So that was the most important thing.
Yeah, and it's funny again, lots to unpack as we go through week after week. You're going to hear some commonalities. Servicers changing midstream is not uncommon, is it, Steve?
No, not at all. I mean, good loans get transferred all the time. They get bought, sold. So it's quite a common thing. And knowing how to navigate that from servicer to servicer it's a skill and it's an important thing.
There's no question about that. And the other thing that we see a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong, but loans with the same servicer, but the guy or gal that we've been working with for years on dozens of files no longer works there. All of a sudden, they're replaced by either somebody offshore who is literally ticking check boxes on a computer screen, or somebody that is not up to speed and overwhelmed, which can be to our advantage if we understand what's going on with them. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The it's the mortgage industry is a living being. So people are constantly moving and changing jobs and being able to navigate that again is it's a skill set, right? That we have of knowing who to talk to, knowing how to talk to them and being able to make sure that the right people are looking at these assets because at the end of the day, that's how you get it through the system and through the process.
And that's a fact. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen out there in real estate and investor land, keeping copious and specific notes and details and date timestamps on everything that happens is so vital because you never know when you're going to have to catch somebody up to speed on a file. And as you're hearing about all the complexities here, it's not just a list a house, sell a house, go to closing. There's so much going on, we can't miss anything. So the risks, I guess, that we're looking at are title complications from the incomplete work and unreleased liens. So if you're going to navigate a real estate deal, you've got to have skill sets or somebody to help you do that. The servicer's liability and confusion, which, by the way, we run into that a lot as well, where they've done something wrong and they don't want to be outed. And so they usually would rather hide from it and let this deal go away, but we can help them resolve it as well. And then the heirs' inability to sell the property until the estate and loan situation's cleared. So these are some of the reasons why most people say, forget that, I'm out of here. So, Steve, help us break this down. How do we resolve all these crazy issues?
Yeah, so like I said, the first thing was we were able to get the heir authorized as what's called the successor in interest. So that was step one. Then we got authorization on the account. We started working, as you said, working with the servicer to determine what was going on with the loan. We wanted to make sure they understood that this was a renovation loan that was not renovated. Walking through that with their loss mitigation team, they had no idea this was a renovation loan. There was nothing in their system that indicated that. There was nothing in their system that showed them that. When we asked for the payoff, we knew that in a renovation loan, there's money held in escrow. And that money held in escrow is really what is drawn, where the money's drawn to renovate the house. That's part of it's an FHA product. They had no clue. They didn't know where that money was. The interesting part of the whole thing was I found all the renovation documentation in the foreclosure they filed. So
It was in
some
foreclosure on top of everything
it
else.
was in foreclosure on top of everything. So they knew that there was a foreclosure. They knew what was going on, but their systems didn't match what their documentation had, and nobody, including their attorney, really had dug into here's what it is, here's what we need to do, how do we resolve this? So they were struggling with this for a while, and we spent time getting them up to speed that this was a renovation loan. Ultimately, they didn't know what to do, so they had to get us in touch with the the note owner. So there was a private company that owned the note, and they had to get us in touch with them to resolve the first part of this, which was there was a renovation loan. The reason that was really important from our standpoint is because what we wanted to do was we wanted to establish with the servicer when we go to sale that they knew exactly what type of loan this was so that it was that we addressed the proper process. So, they did the proper
Mhm.
servicing, they did the proper valuations, it went through the proper guidelines. We didn't want to just to go into the wrong set of the program we wanted. And so that was really why it was really important for us to make sure that it went through the right program. And that's where we started and what we wanted to do. So that was really the first part of working with the servicer was just to get the loan aligned in the right program.
You've said so many important things there. And again, if you're relatively new to distressed real estate sales and or loss mitigation strategies, it really is vital to know where this deal needs to go and how it needs to be managed. Because you said a couple of things like, for example, the valuation, getting the valuation ordered from a servicer is sometimes a minor miracle. And to your point, if it's going down path A because they think it's one type of loan and they're okay with the broker's price opinion, come to find out it should have gone down path B. And those guidelines say you have to have an appraisal. Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? You just lost a couple of months in the process. And these are some of the reasons why people say, these damn deals take so long. Yeah, because they're not done properly to begin with. And doing it twice or three times often ends up being the situation.
And,
So
and
talk a little
also,
bit about the probate, Steve. And I'm sorry for cutting you off.
yeah, before the probate, and one thing I want to add that the timeline and where it gets frustrating, what everybody, what we try to do is we try to deal with the elongated issues right up front. But the issues are always there, right? So when somebody says, "Hey, I want that house," right? Well, if it goes through foreclosure, guess what? The servicer's going through the exact same issue on the back end. So yeah, they foreclose, but then they spend months and months and months and months clearing up the property, clearing up the title, clearing up their issues before they can even get it to the sales. So from the standpoint of a problem property is a problem property. It's true whether it's in foreclosure or not.
Mhm.
Foreclosure doesn't fix it. It's just people don't see it because it doesn't go on the market for 6 or 7 or 8 months. Whereas we're
Right.
actually resolving it relatively quickly because we're bringing it to the forefront and actively working it. It's just frustrating for everybody to get the property listed and then get it through the short sale process. And so we try to do as much as we can up front.
Yep. And it's also important, I think, to note that in many of the transactions that we deal with, whether they're investor purchases, real estate agent listings, and sales, all of the stakeholders win in these deals. There are no losers. The banks, the lien holders generally will recover. We've calculated on average 28 to 32% better because they're not foreclosing on the property. And there's all kinds of issues with that. If you're a loan servicer and you go through a foreclosure, you get curtailed on a lot of your fees and those kinds of things, and the banking, grading, and all of those things. But the ultimate homeowner, whoever that is, ends up without having a foreclosure on their record. The banks recover more money. If it's a bankruptcy, the bankruptcy trustees and the estate recover more money. The professionals all make out well. So this is an amazing system, but it's a lot of work and it requires a lot of expertise. So let's talk a little bit about the probate, Steve. How does that get resolved? Did we have to get an attorney involved?
Yeah, so in this matter, there was somebody, there was a real estate investor who was interested in buying the house. They were working with the heir, which perfectly fine.
Mhm.
They were, I think that they were willing to help the heir out with some of the probate costs and whatnot. Again, totally fine because it's not part of the real estate transaction.
Mhm.
That's a private matter. And the real issue was, hey, do we want to go through that expense and go through that cost and be able to do it if we're not sure we can transact on the property. So they gathered all the documents, they talked to an attorney, they knew what they needed to do in order to get the probate done, but they wanted to make sure the property was set, ready to go for sale before they did that. And so once we were able to confirm, yes, we've got everything lined up and ready to go with the mortgage investor, the mortgage servicer, we can transact. We've got all the information right. They finally moved forward and consulted with an attorney, and outside of what we did, they were able to move through the probate process to ensure that the heir is the actual person who will be able to sign at the end of the transaction, which was,
Mhm.
from our standpoint, an important thing because the heir is not legally allowed to sign anything. Then we go through the whole process for not because we get to the end of the transaction and no, you're not legally allowed to sign any of the sales documents. So there's a coordination there with us on the outside transaction of the probate.
Yep, no question about that. So then we coordinate title, and this was all pre-transaction essentially, right? All this work was done to get the property ready for sale. Um,
Yes.
so what was the ultimate outcome in this case?
Yeah. So ultimately, what we ended up doing was it's taken months. We got the first servicer to acknowledge that there was an issue. and that they didn't have the proper information. They got us in touch with the loan investor. The loan investor then said, "Hey, we're transferring the loan to a new company. We'll make sure they have everything." Um, so we had to get the heir authorized. We got the new servicer on board. We got all the documentation from them, and they couldn't get their loan servicing information right. The loan investor, the note owner, they were able to confirm with us that it was a renovation loan and that they're sitting on all the money for the renovation and that it should show up on a payoff, that the money's sitting in escrow. So we were trying to get that payoff to prove that so that when we went through the process, we had all the right numbers. Um,
Mhm.
the ultimately the loan investor finally said nobody knows what they're doing, we're just taking this property back into our account, and now we're in the process. They said go ahead and just send us an offer. We'll take a look at it, we'll transact on it, make sure that we get through the transaction on our own. Ultimately they have the financial duty on the note because they own it, and so we're in process of getting that done with them now.
Fantastic. So, real deals in the real world, ladies and gentlemen. So, let's talk about a few takeaways from today's episode. Again, we're so glad that you joined us. Your time's as important as everybody else's. So, let's get to the nitty gritty here. So, number one, you run across an asset, a piece of real estate that looks like it's got a lot of hair on it. First of all, don't dismiss the property right off the bat. If it's an estate situation, don't dismiss the estate properties with unresolved loan histories. They often have hidden potential. We'll talk about many of these on future podcasts where the loan actually evaporates, it goes away. And that's an amazing thing if you're a real estate investor. Servicers can make and do make documentation mistakes. So, right off the bat, Steve covered that very eloquently, verifying that we're all talking apples to apples here. Do you see the same things we see? Are we talking about the same loan? Are the loan balances and default statuses in line with what everybody thinks so that we can work together on this? Agents and investors should know the probate sale path for sure, but you don't need to be an expert. What you do want are partners that you can work with, such as asset resolution advisors that can guide you down this path and even do the work for you, because in most cases we get paid by the banks for what we do. So that's a very important tip as well. And then the importance of working with those specialists in this transaction. So, Steve, let's recap, I guess, before we close out on this first podcast. Complex doesn't mean impossible, it means opportunity. Would you like to opine a little bit on that? Because I think sometimes we get scared by complexity, and in fact, it can be just the opposite.
Yeah, that's really where our expertise and experience comes in and on these transactions. For both real estate agents and real estate investors on both sides of these transactions. From the real estate agent side, there's some who are concerned about how quickly they can get through a transaction. Their complexities, right? Bankruptcy, foreclosure, probate issues, lien loan issues, things like this. And we'll talk about another in podcast specifically. And they walk away from it. They think it's impossible to overcome. And really, I think you nailed it on the head before, which is you need an expert, right? You need somebody who knows how to transact on them and how to navigate this. This one took a little bit a longer time simply because of how complex the issue was, right? We didn't have we didn't have somebody who saw the same loan in their system that they were actually transacting on. That took some time to navigate. But not all of them are like that. A lot of them are just a matter of communication with the servicer, getting in touch with the right person or the right people to make sure that systems are updated correctly, if it's a title issue. So those complexities, whether it's trying to list and sell the property or trying to buy the property, can be resolved. And it's the know-how, knowing where to go, who to talk to, and how to get it resolved, which is really the key to the transaction. And partnering with somebody like asset resolution, I think, is an important, it's an important skill to have or important resource to have in your toolbox.
Yep. And, folks, Steve and I have been working together in this space for maybe 14 years now. And we had a company that did nothing but bankruptcy short sales. And that's a piece of what we do now at Asset Resolution Advisors. This is our first podcast. So you'll start seeing more of us on social media. You'll see more of us on YouTube. And if you're watching this right now, you're seeing the recorded version of it. So there will be a link for you to click on. But we really encourage you to join our community in school. That's skool.com, Asset Resolution Advisors. That community is like-minded individuals that are in real estate, whether they're investors or real estate agents, that can communicate with each other, participate in our ongoing training, as well as on-demand training that we've got available for those that want to get more involved in the loss mitigation space. So until our next episode, which we will keep under wraps until we put it out there to the marketplace, we really, really appreciate you joining us. If you're working a short sale, if you're working a bankruptcy sale, or any deal with liens, judgments, or complex issues, Asset Resolution Advisors is here to help you. Please subscribe, follow us, and send us your toughest deals. We turn problems into closings. Am I right, Steve?
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to stop this recording now, and we'll see you next time.